Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Thursday, June the 27th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, David Williams. He's produced the program. Let's get it on the go. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. Well, I know of at least two people in the province who are going to be tuned into the Nation League volleyball quarterfinals today. Canada taking on Japan, 12:30 Island time. Take it from me, it's completely worth your while if you have an opportunity to tune in and check out some of the action. Is there a problem with the headset? Because I just went silent. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, hopefully you can hear me. So yeah, Canada's number 9 in the world, Japan number 2 in the world. And good morning to poor old Jays fans. It's becoming really difficult to continue to be a Toronto Blue Jays fan. I mean, basically they stink, can't hit. Got rained out last night, but look out. Here come the home run hammering Yankees into the Rogers Centre tonight. So with Aaron Judge and his 30 home runs, but good morning to the Jays fans. And just coincidentally, yesterday I was kind of mesmerized watching some teenagers skateboard, and some of them were really quite good. You know, some pretty significant tricks that they were pulling off, so I stopped and watched for a little while. We used to skateboard when we were young. I couldn't do anything, a little bit of tic-tac, maybe a 180, that's it. So it was on this date, 25 years ago, 1999, that Tony Hawk, one of the most famous skateboarders of all time, Tony Hawk became the first person ever to land a 900. 2.5 full rotations in the air, landed on a skateboard. He had tried it a dozen times. It was at the 5th edition of the X Games, which have become uber popular, 12 times, but eventually landed became the first person to do it. You often wonder when you look at people who are doing those types of tricks, whether it be on skateboards or on snowmobiles or on dirt bikes, how many times they must have got busted up, broke up by trying to accomplish some of those tricks. But anyway, off to more important matters, I guess. So, I've heard from a few people overnight via email. They're concerned travelers traveling with WestJet. So last week, I thought they had averted a potential strike belonged to the mechanics. So they're members of the Aircraft Mechanics Fraternal Association. So they're poised to strike as of 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time on Friday. As a result, WestJet cancelled 25 flights scheduled for Thursday and Friday in an effort apparently to safely park the aircraft so they don't have passengers and crew stranded. But this impacts some 3,300 passengers, so the problems just continue to persist. So I've heard from some of these 3,300 passengers overnight. The frustration is very real. And remember, there's now new legislation here in the country that does not allow for replacement workers in any regulated workplace, including air transportation, which is airlines, airports, aerodromes, and aircraft operations. So if you're one of those WestJet customers who is now left in a lurch, hopefully they're able to reach a deal, because a lot of the power now is in the hands of the unionized workers, right? No replacement work, or people like to call it anti-scab legislation. We had a conversation with a gentleman from Turo. Turo is the car-sharing quasi-rental program that's in place. It was pretty successful here in the province last year. We spoke to a lady, if I remember correctly, who had some 5 cars in the Turo fleet. So they made a little business out of it. So if you're someone who has been involved with Turo and have a personal story to tell, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I think that'd be helpful, because since that conversation, several people have reached out looking for more information about Turo. One of the primary questions being asked is what the implication is on your car insurance. Turo has an insurance policy in place if you enter into an agreement with them. So if you're a Turo person, let's talk to you this morning. And on that front, as we try to fill up our tanks, which is always a scary affair. So the PUB, interestingly, there's a price freeze in Labrador over the course of the winter. Of course, the sea ice makes it difficult, if not impossible, to get in for the resupply. So the price freeze in Labrador has been lifted. So the price of gasoline dropped some 13 cents in some areas overnight. For the rest of the province, the rest of the island in particular, gas up around 3 cents, negligible change in other fuels. But there you go. And of course, inside that world, there's always going to be the direct conversation regarding how the taxes are applied, the amount of tax being charged, and of course, yes, to provoke your call, the carbon tax. All right, and in addition to the PUB, again, just a reminder, maybe people aren't quite aware of this issue, but when we talk about how the formula is created and utilized in this province, in an effort to be much more reflective of how it's handled in the rest of the the rest of the Atlantic provinces, the proposal being considered, and you can react to this directly to the PUB, is about the economic zones and the cost for the distribution of fuels. So consequently, if the new proposal is adopted, I'll see an increase here in the city of St. John's of about 0.7 cents. But if you're on St. Brendan's or you're on Fogo Island, it's going to be 5 cents. So not an insignificant raise if this new proposal is adapted by the Public Utilities Board. And on that, having mentioned Fogo Island, I understand the frustration regarding the ferry system. So about 6 months of being in dry dock, apparently just yesterday, the parts required to fix the engine have arrived. And so that means whenever, sometime in the future, when the sea trials will begin, to get that vessel back on the Fogo Island Change Islands farewell run. But I know the frustration, and it's very real. We talk about the ferries a lot. If you want to take it on, we can do it. I hear Brian Medore in the VOCM News this morning saying that the province has officially filed lawsuit against the federal government regarding equalisation. And yes, we can talk about that being political optics, or however you want to talk about it, and or timing, and they want to distance ourselves from the federal Liberals, whatever the case may be. But the issue is really quite real. And I think if we back the politics out of it, people have been complaining about equalization and how it's applied, whether or not it's fair across the board, for years. So whether or not this has any actual teeth and can be successful, because as it states in the Constitution, the federal government's obligation is simply to make the equalization payments. But of course, it's all based on a revenue side formula, but the province contends that it doesn't bring in or factor in the cost to supply these equitable services across the country. And of course, we've got a geographical challenge, we've got an aging demographic issue, which brings along associated upward costs, but they've officially filed the equalization formula lawsuit, and we'll see where it goes. Because the federal Liberals have maintained the formula that's been in place for quite a long time, extended it to 2029, and that is the basis of the challenge. And of course, we can talk about the timing, but we can also talk about the fairness, because I think there was an actual conversation we had there. Since 2008, the rest of the Atlantic provinces have received some $45 billion, us zero. Now, this fiscal year, receiving, I think it's $217 million, but that's a pretty significant issue. Well, let's take it on. All right. I heard Brian once again talk to this issue about there's a mixed reaction to the lifting of the Northern Cod moratorium. Mixed, to say the very least. I mean, we go from all the way from members of Parliament in particular, Liberal members, saying this is historic. You know, what a day for the province. And other side of the coin, this is a dark day, and it's disgusting treatment. I mean, we've heard it all here in the last 24 hours. So just have a little bit of a look at the numbers. So I heard Russell Bauer speaking with someone from Oceania Canada. They're concerned with any increase in the quota. And it's pretty moderate increase, going from 13,000 tonnes to 18,000 tonnes in the total allowable catch. All right, there's a lot to this. So one thing. The DFO itself says there has not been any stock growth since 2016, yet has taken this decision. Again, people can talk about the timing, whether it be in reaction to the devastating by-election loss in Toronto, St. Paul's, whether or not that D word is overstating it, but that's, you know, always going to be in consideration. And yes, politics is timing. But let's have a little closer look here. So if you hear from the union, they think this is a terrible idea for a variety of reasons. Number one is the inclusion of the offshore. So there's been an agreement in place since 1982 that has not been updated since. That says there will be no additional quota for the offshore until the total allowable catch reaches 115,000 tonnes, and we are a far cry from that. And then one of the issues that I think is absolutely fair for discussion is when we talk some 6% for the offshore fleet, and then when the moratorium technically was lifted, it triggers rules belong to NAFO that there's 5% additional quota for international trawlers. Then you talk about the gear. So when we have been talking the lack of recovery in any reasonable or meaningful fashion since the moratorium was instigated 32 years ago, is the gear. So in the offshore, those massive trawls dragging the bottom versus on the inshore, whether it be hand line or gill nets, which have a pretty short soak time and don't have that type of implication regarding the seabed. But it's hard to applaud bringing the draggers back in here. Yes, I know we have people working on the draggers, and that's how they make their living. And this not to jeopardize or to criticize what you do, because a job is a job and we all need one. But dragging the ocean floor, it just sounds like a terrible idea. We know what the impact has been over those years. Remember, back in the 80s, the total allowable catch would be in the neighborhood of 250,000 tons, and whether it be the offshore fractionary freezer trawlers and the type of gear used. So there's a lot of consternation on some sides here. Now, it has been applauded. And there's even people out there thinking we could have moved all the way to 25,000 tons. But the union in particular was primed to react in this fashion. Why? Because of the allocation of the redfish. So there was already some pretty steamed people working for the union because, of course, again, why? Because of the allocation that went to the offshore. So this sort of mimics what happened with redfish. So anyway, there's a lot to that conversation, and we're happy to take it on. But no growth in the stock since 2016, but yet this has been announced. Not to say it's good or bad, but those are just some of the facts. All right, a quick check-in up in Labrador. So hopefully the weather is favorable and get some help from Mother Nature here, because the fire, as we know, has tripped lines with the water and the smoke damage, and of course it has now crept within 3 kilometers of Churchill Falls. Fingers crossed, there's some cautious optimism out there that they're going to be able to beat this thing back, and the severity level has been lowered. Update though, the community of Lab City, of course, had their power coming from Fairmont, Quebec. Wildbush has now put back on the Churchill Falls grid, so they now have power. But the conversation needs now to go to long-term solutions, because you can't just flip a switch and all of a sudden some power provision can be immediately put in place, whether it be for Wildbush, which is totally disconnected from the grid. So those conversations will go on. We had a good call on it yesterday, asking why are we having to rely on the province of Quebec for power here when we call ourselves as energy warehouse, and a Labrador sitting on so much of the generation that we all use here on the island, and yet it took Wildbush a fair amount of time to be back up with power. So let's talk about that. And what are the long-term solutions? I heard Jennifer Williams, the CEO of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, talking about it. What they are, we're not really sure. Okay, keep going. For some reason, some of these stories and issues kind of grate people, and fair enough. But when we talk about the big tent city at Confederation Building, and remember, it didn't just come out of nowhere. Homelessness is not something new. Is it worse than it was before? Maybe. We know people flock to the urban centres for access to services, which further complicates the problem. But when the tents were right across from the House of Government, it got significantly new attention and focus. Then, of course, moved to Colonial Building, and the focus continued. Then that was disbanded, and the tenters just went elsewhere. And so there was a little tent encampment around the Grace Hospital Nurses Residence site. It was kind of out of sight, but the owner of the property, which of course is the provincial government, complained to the RNC. The RNC went down, and without incident, people were moving away from there. The comments that I get sometimes is, look, people just need to be looking out for number one. People need to be on their own 2 feet. People need to be self-reliant and self-sufficient and get back to work and all these types of things, which is sometimes easier said than done. If we are talking about the amount of money we spend on shelters, and we can take that issue on, and the amount of money we're spending at the Comfort Inn and all the rest of it, the fact of the matter is homelessness is a bigger problem than simply not having a roof over your head. There is a comprehensive study done the relationship between homeless and being hospitalized, and this was done in this country, in Toronto, at the teaching hospital. They looked at some 1,000 admissions, and the numbers were crystal clear. You are far more likely to spend twice as much time in hospital if you're homeless because of the complex needs that you have versus if you have a home. So if we're talking about the amount of money spent, we really have to factor that in, because as you've heard me say in the past, the 2 most expensive things in this province or in this country are a night in the hospital or a night in the clinic. So when we see homelessness persist to the levels that it does, then just factor in healthcare costs. And I'm not going to assert that people who are homeless are more likely to commit a crime, but that might happen too. So it's the healthcare cost is as much an issue as when we talk about our social responsibility or what's morally right to do. But that report is really quite clear, and it's available for everyone to have a look. The teaching hospital in Toronto, 1,000 admissions, twice as long, twice as costly for people who are homeless. Anyway, let's go. This is good news, I guess. And we talk about the home care, or pardon me, the healthcare vacancies. So apparently pretty successful in trying to sign up graduates from local nursing schools here in the province. So 93% of the graduates have been signed up. So 203 bachelor nursing students and 167 practical nursing students. So they're talking about signing bonuses, improved compensation, bursaries, improved supports for work-life balance. Exactly what that means, don't know. But also tuition support. Again, it's hard for people to say, well, I'm going to tell you what you should do, where you should work, and how you should work. And of course, not everyone's going to work exactly where they want in healthcare. Like if I want to work on 4 North B, that might not be available. And not to be over the top, but when we talk about the 25 new doctors that were added in the first quarter of the year, all coming with a 5-year return in service, because of the simple fact that we are indeed subsidizing education in all these nursing schools and at Memorial University and at the college, should there not be an automatic 5-year return in service? And I know, again, it doesn't feel right to say, well, you must do this. But I am helping you through as a taxpayer. And everyone listening to this program who's a taxpayer. So maybe, just maybe, we can implement that across the board. Or is that too much? Your thoughts are welcome here this morning. And also, if you are someone who attended the town hall regarding the Kenmount Terrace school issue and all the surrounding catchment schools, whether that be Larkhall Academy or Larry's Brook or St Andrews or PwC, and some of the reconfiguration numbers, we're happy to take on education from any angle, as you are aware. And on that front, plenty of frustrated teachers in my email inbox here this morning. Apparently, none of the province's teachers got paid last night. Okay. So payroll, I'll read directly from this email from this teacher. Payroll is an ongoing issue with subs constantly missing money from the checks and replacement teachers sometimes not getting paid for months. It's a mess. The NLTA has put out a release to the province's teachers saying that all the responsible entities at government have been made aware and they're working on a resolution. But I can tell you, I've got 25 frustrated teachers in my email inbox, and justifiably so. You know, it should be pretty fundamental to be able to get paid. You know, bring back that conversation to federal employees still struggling with the haunted, deeply troubled, gremlin-filled payroll, the Phoenix pay system. So all that is available to you. All right, how are we doing on the phone, Dave? Oh, quick note for the lovers of the majestic mammal, the whale. They're in St. Vincent's. If you have never taken the time to go to St. Vincent's and see the whales in action and in full flight, it's completely worth it. And of course, it's always worth a trek through St. Mary's Bay. But how close you get to the whales, given that steep drop-off, very close to the shore in St. Vincent's, totally worth it. Take it on. It's absolutely brilliant afternoon. All right, we're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Gail wants to kick it off talking about issues in the classroom. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin on line number 4. Good morning, Gail. You're on the air.
I just wanted to discuss an issue regarding my grandchild.
Okay.
Last year in May or June, there was a psychologist came on board and was going to help work with my child, or grandchild, I should say, in the school. And in September, he or she accepted a position somewhere else, so I was told. So I ended up with nobody to work with my grandchild, only the IRTs. When I mentioned it to them, they were not aware of the fact that there was a program put in place, so they contacted the lady and had the program put in place somewhat. But it seemed like after February month, the child was sent home earlier in the morning. They started with like he was going to school till 1:40 until about January or February month. Then he was sent home like 12 o'clock, 11:30. First it started off at 10 o'clock. Then he was increased to 10:30, then 11. By the time school closed, he was only going to school till 11:40. I don't understand why there was nobody else put in place to replace this other person to help with my grandchild.
Just a couple of very quick questions, Gail. What kind of program did they put in place for the child?
Well, it was a program to work with him where he's autistic.
Right, so was it working one-on-one with him in the classroom with everybody else or in the library alone? I'm just curious because I know there's a bunch of different programs for children on the spectrum.
They didn't actually discuss that, if it was going to be in the classroom or just one-on-one.
Okay.
In the meeting. And we were supposed to have a meeting with the principal every 2 weeks. That got scrapped. We were supposed to have an ISSP meeting. That got scrapped. We never had a meeting all year, and the child, in my opinion, was only tossed to the wayside and not taught anything in the school, only just sent home. And we had no respite, we had no help, and as far as I'm concerned, there was no help in the school with the child, only whatever I did with him at home.
I'm not sure how to ask this, but where is the child on the spectrum? Like verbal? Non-verbal?
Oh, he's verbal.
Okay.
He's verbal. Oh, yes, he can talk. He'll say anything, sir. Yeah, he is verbal.
What grade are we talking about?
Well, he's going to grade 6.
Okay. And so how have the first 5 grades, the first 4 grades gone? Did he have ongoing, I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl, did the child have ongoing supports? How does school work with the child? Has there been success?
Yes, he had ongoing support through until grade, well, really until grade 4. After grade 4, things started dropping back. He was doing well till grade 4. Now one of his IRTs went for 4 months with kindergarten class, and there was another lady working with another IRT, but then she went off on sick leave, and then the other IRT came back and worked with him. But then in February, the child's hours started getting dropped back.
Yeah. So the IRT moved off to a different classroom, and there was no backfill.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Just one other IRT, that's it, working with him. And she was a new girl, a new teacher. And the one who went to kindergarten for 4 months, she was the older lady that was teaching him all along. And she moved to kindergarten, and then when this other lady that was working with the other IRT went off on sick leave, there was just the one IRT working with him, along with student assistants, and the student assistants are not supposed to do anything, only take the child to the bathroom or on trips or things like that, right?
Yeah, because the IRT is an instructional resource teacher, just so people know what the acronym means.
That's exactly right, yeah.
You know, when we look at certain cases that have really grabbed headlines, it comes to mind Carter Churchill. We basically failed Carter Churchill because the required supports, and in this case was someone who learned and could communicate with Churchill in American Sign Language, and it didn't happen. He sat in silence. We completely betrayed him. He made his way through the Human Rights Commission. There was an award for the Churchill family, but I would extend that to everybody who needs additional support, because the model of inclusive education, it sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? In concept, it's absolutely what we should do, but the way it's currently been structured, the way it's currently been staffed, it's not working. There are children like your grandchild that are falling through the cracks.
Yeah, and speaking of sign language, sir, I've known sign language since I've been 10-year-old. I learned it from a friend.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I could commute with any child in school. And I was hired to work with the student as a student assistant, but I never did get a position. I was hired back on the 3rd of January 2017.
Have you ever done some work as a translator? Because we are woefully short of translators here in the province.
I've commuted with other people. I've met people in the mall and have talked to them in sign language.
Okay.
When I was doing my on-the-job training as a PCA, I worked with a young lady, and everybody else would have to write down what they wanted her to do, but I used to talk to her in sign language. I can commute in single sign language, no problem. I can work with any child if I was given the chance to.
That's interesting.
Speaking of that, yeah.
I'm going to get an email from the Association for the Deaf looking for your number, because we really are short on translators here in the province, which comes with a huge concern. Anyway, not to derail this conversation.
No.
Gail, anything else you'd like to tell us about the child and the education system, and what you think is happening, what needs to happen?
Well, they said that he gets aggressive, but now I work with him at home, and he cooperates with me.
Okay.
And they said he gets aggressive at school. I even asked if I'd come in and watch, but I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to come in to school. So, I would like to go in and just see. I'd like to be a fly on the wall some days to see what is actually happening. They said in his report, like I didn't know until he got his report card, that he was, they said he didn't know the concept of less than, greater than, or equal to, for example. I tested him the other day. He'd done everything perfect. He adds 4 and 5 digit numbers. He can subtract 4 and 5 digit numbers. They're telling me he doesn't know these things, and he's able to do it. And in language arts, he's able to read, no problem. And he can read words that you don't expect a grade 8 or 9 child to. And he can spell. He said he was sitting down when he was 4 years old spelling words and adding and subtracting numbers. He's very intelligent, sir. Very, very intelligent. and I hate to see them fall between the cracks when I notice there's someone out there who could work with them. I even got signs made up to put around today. I'm looking for someone. I have 30 hours a week approved for the months of July and August. I have 25 hours approved for when school opens from September till June of next year. For someone to come and work with my child, I'd appreciate anyone to come and work with them. They will certainly be paid fairly high wages if they will come. And I would like to have someone that's qualified to work with an autistic child, preferably.
So, Gail, if someone does reach out about these issues here this morning, do you want me to share your phone number with them?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
happy
to do it. Happy to do that. I appreciate your time, and keep me in the loop.
I will, sir.
Thanks for the call this morning.
And thank you for your time and understanding.
My pleasure, Gail. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I mean, again, we don't want to isolate or ostracize people with some, whether it be learning disabilities or ADHD, or they're on the spectrum, or they have some behavioral issues, or they're a runner, or they're blind, or they're deaf. But we've got to make sure that if we're going to have this model in place, then it has to work. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, the current way it's structured does not work, which is, of course, a major league problem. And while we talk about children who are falling through the cracks, the amount of time for some teachers who simply don't have the required training to deal with some children with exceptionalities, then consequently what else happens in the classroom? Then children who do not need additional support are also not getting the type of support that they require. So the model just doesn't work. And I'm not saying we just blow it up and start from scratch, but we have to have an honest conversation about exactly what we're doing, exactly what we're achieving, or how we're failing. And we should have that conversation. Let's go to the line. This is from someone who is absolutely in the know. So it's questions from a teacher. I wonder if the meetings were requested by Gail's granddaughter, family, and how the school responded. If a student is on partial days, meetings are supposed to happen every 2 weeks, period. All right, let's keep going. Let's get Darren on 5. Darren, you're on the air. Darren on line number 5, you're on the air. Darren?
Hello?
Hello there.
Are you talking to Darren?
I'm talking to you, if you're Darren.
I want to wish a happy 40th anniversary to Sandy and Kim Potter from Bridget.
Sandy and Kim Potter, 40th anniversary today. Fantastic. What relation are you to?
Tomorrow. The anniversary tomorrow.
Tomorrow's anniversary. Got it. What's your relation to either or?
He's my brother. He's my brother, and Kim is my sister-in-law.
Okay, terrific. Are you going out?
I have no idea. They're originally from Lab City. That's where they used to live. Wildwood, Labrador.
Okay.
And they moved to Bridges a couple of years ago.
And where are you calling from?
What?
Where are you calling from? Where do you live?
Bernio Street.
Oh, so you're here in town. Are you going out to Brigus tomorrow?
I doubt it. I don't even know what Brigus is.
It's not too far from town.
No, it's okay. I can do compliment last night with his anniversary. I know his phone number.
Okay, well, hopefully they're listening to the program and get your anniversary wishes. Thanks for letting us know. Oh, Darren just dropped. That wasn't me. That was on his end. All right, happy anniversary to, I think it's it, Sandy and Kim Potter? I think that's what it was. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, there's an absolutely curious story in the media about someone who's convicted of sexual assault against a child down in the United States, in Arizona, I believe. Pled guilty, served a couple of years in prison. He was found having used methamphetamine, and he was supposed to be taken to account for whatever back in prison, possibly. And now he escaped. He made his way to where? Here. Colin's in the queue. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Well, apparently the caller that we just had before the break said Stan and Kim Potter. My apologies. So happy anniversary to Stan and Kim Potter. Okay, before we get to Colin, let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to one of the marine biologists at Oceana, Canada. That's Jack Daly. Good morning, Jack. You're on the air.
Hey, Patty. How are you doing?
Doing grand. How about you?
Great. And just calling in, listening to your opening and just about how, this cod fishery opening has a lot of reactions around the spectrum. But one thing that is missing, as usual, is just some of the facts. And so just want to add that to the debate here.
Where do we start with the facts?
Yeah, well, I guess number one is that, what I've been hearing from many people in the province is that, opposed to what the government is saying, that this is some big historic change. We have had a fishery for the past few years. We've had a fishery up to 13,000 tons. This is a 5,000-ton change with a lot of concerns around access and allocation. But the one thing that isn't changing is, the state of the stock, the biomass of the stock, which is still kind of stagnating since 2018 and predicted to decline in the next, 3 years or so. So I really think all the conversations should really center around that the future that we're being promised actually has quite a short window because of just a really lack of visioning for this fishery.
Well, I have offered this particular fact that even from DFO itself, they say that there has been no significant growth since 2016, as a matter of fact. So how does that jibe with any increase? People will say, well, this is simply political, and it might be. Liberal members of Parliament say it's not political, it's based on science, but the science says there's been no growth. So what science are they referring to? And some of the frustrations people have with allocation, and there's even, I think, a question like last year in the cod fishery, the fellows that were out at the cod, or the harvesters that were out at the cod, they sometimes were told there was trip limits, and they told they could only buy the processors would only buy on certain days. So we have a processing question also in addition to the allocation.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that came out of this press release, which we're still waiting on the details, is this proposed kind of tagging situation that will come in 2025 for tour boat operators for the rec fishery. So adds another layer there. But, what the things that we can control, because I know we talk a lot about, especially when I call in on Capeland, we talk about, the ecosystem has big impacts on this as well, along with our commercial fisheries. And, one thing that's been made really clear over the past few years, and I think a lot of people have known this for decades, is that connection between cod and Capeland, which I work on quite closely. And, we are now having a Capeland fishery at 15,000 tons. We now have a cod fishery at 18,000 tons. Both stocks are not predicted to grow. There's no kind of U-line shape that we want to see when we talk about rebuilding stocks. And, this management that's being offered really kind of once again skirts the question of where are we going to be in 3 years? Where are we going to be in 5 years? And I unfortunately think in the next couple of years, we're going to have to walk back a lot of these press releases that are coming out, both really angry and really excited, because we're going to be back at square one where, the fishery will be reduced. And then all of these advancements that are being made on the market side, on even the, tour boat side, will be kind of wiped off the board there.
I heard one of your colleagues offer a number regarding the recreational food fishery, and I think she said some 2,200 tons. Is that just a guesstimate, or what is that based on?
So there are various estimates, so some coming from industry, some coming from DFO science itself, but it is largely uncertain because we don't have those metrics, which could be achieved by a tagging situation in the future, but it really is very small in comparison to the now commercial fishery, and even in comparison to the previous, sentinel fishery, as we called it. So I think the real concern going forward, and one that has also been raised, are not only the TAC and the quota, but what are these other management measures that we have on gear, on getting that grade A quality? One thing that's been sad about this change from critical to cautious for cod, which again is an exciting change in the science. But one thing that has been sad is that the rebuilding plan, which was in development for years, which doesn't just focus on quota, but also focuses on these long-term metrics, including gear restrictions, including spatial and temporal restrictions. The minute the stock was assessed as above the critical zone, the department shelved that plan. Unfortunately, within 2 or 3 years, once the stock goes back into the critical zone, as is expected, they're going to have to restart that planning process all over again. So we continue to just kick this down, each year, just relying on this quota and really missing, this longer-term vision. Do we want high-quality cod? Do we want it caught in, local communities across the province? And so that is really what's underlying, I think, the consternation around this decision. Cod still has many concerning biological indicators. There's high levels of natural mortality. We still have declining weight, declining length at age, and once again, that insufficient Capeland availability. So all this talk about the future and what this means, we just really want to caution everybody that without a real change in how we think about managing the stock, unfortunately, I think history is about to repeat itself in the coming years.
Yeah, and you hear from George Rose, who's a notable scientist from this province, talk about the Northern Cod having returned to more historic migration patterns, which is part of the conversation. Capelin, mackerel, we're still in the moratorium, even though that's a straddle stock, and the Americans are catching it, and we're not. So there's a lot more to this, and of course, people in this province will always talk about the predator that is the seal and how many millions of them are off the coast, which is absolutely part of the conversation. The changing temperature of the water, phytoplankton, sunlight, sea ice. I mean, there's every different facet of this needs to be part of it, as opposed to simply saying the catch rates that people are experiencing, the total allowable catch, that's the be-all and the end-all, because that's only part of the conversation.
Yeah, and one thing I would just like to raise before I end here is that, we are managing this fishery, every year there's that advisory committee. It's the same players. It's been the same players since the collapse. It'll continue to be the same players going forward. There is very little availability for people to raise other concerns, for people to, have other ideas about how we manage this. And, that is something I know I've talked to you before about Capelin, but as long as we allow the same people, to continue making decisions and really guiding the conversation here, we're not going to get change. I know, many members of parliament signed on to this decision. Many people are excited, but what's missing is really that broad swath of community opinion, community knowledge, from what they see on the beaches every year. And so that is something that, as we, cautiously enter this new era of a commercial fishery, we really want to see more people advocating for what they want to see, and more people, again, trying to influence DFO, trying to get in these meetings. These meetings are not just for the union, for the processors, or for NGOs. They're for everybody. And that's one thing that I think we all need to come away with here, that this is our resource and everybody should have a say.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotal evidence, catch rates absolutely belong with the quote-unquote official science compilation. I appreciate the time as usual. Jack, thanks for the call.
Thanks so much, Patty. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. And, of course, I'm not a scientist, but when we talk about things like the Northern Cod are out of the critical zone into the cautious zone, it's important to note that even DFO itself says that doesn't mean there's any more fish in the water. What changed? They went from using modeling data that begins in 1983 back to 1954. So, yeah, we've got a different label from critical to cautious, but they've said the most important part out loud. That does not mean that there's any more cod. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Colin. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Daly. How are you this morning?
That's kind. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks. I want to talk about Mr. Robert Land.
Amazing story.
American. It just boggles my mind. And I got to tell you, there's not too many things that boggle my mind, but this boggles my mind. You have an American child sex offender from Arizona, ends up in this country illegally, finds his way all the way to Newfoundland, is able to get employment here, is able to live here under his own name, gets arrested in 2018 by the RCMP. They know who he is. He's on Interpol's radar. He's on the RCMP radar, and he's on the United States Marshal Service's radar as a fugitive. And yet, the RCMP arrested him in 2018. They release him, no reasons why, and he's still allowed to live here.
So let's just tell people who Robert Land is. In 2005, he pled guilty in Arizona to sexual assault against a 16-year-old girl. He served a couple of 2.5 years in prison, or he was sentenced to 2.5 years. I'm not sure how long he spent in there. After he was released, he was put on lifetime probation. There was a warrant for his arrest in Arizona in 2013. He tested positive for methamphetamine. They couldn't find him at his registered address. He makes his way to Carbonair. 6 years ago, Americans were told that the fugitive that they're looking for is in this province, but it doesn't appear that the U.S. officials took any action. And as you mentioned, in 2018, he was arrested by the RCMP, and this was allowed to go on for all these years. Mind-boggling is a good way to put it.
It just makes me shake my head. These are the types of stories that get in the media that fuel the right-wing propaganda machine, that our border is porous and people are asleep at the wheel, These are the types of stories that unfortunately make the headlines, that generate this perceived notion that criminals are coming in here left, right, and center, and the vast majority of criminals are not. But he's an example of mistakes in the system. He comes here. How he gets here? He either got here on a plane or by ferry. You had no identification. You're here. You're a fugitive. You cross the border. You don't have a passport or anything like that because you would have been refused entry if you had to go through a legal border checkpoint. They wouldn't have let him in because he would have been flagged by Canada Customs that he's a fugitive wanted in the United States. So he makes it all the way here. He applies for a driver's license because he's working as a truck driver for a paving company. So he gets a Newfoundland and Labrador driver's license. He's working for this company, so that means he has to have a social insurance number. So he would have had to have applied for that too, right? He's getting all this Canadian provincial and federal documentation to be here. And he ends up being arrested 6 years ago by the RCMP. No word on why he was arrested or whether there are any charges laid in relation to that. And they just let him go back into the community, a convicted child sex offender from the United States. He should have been immediately taken, put into custody, and have his ass booted back on a plane down to New England.
Fair enough. I mean, there was a warrant issued a long time ago, and that absolutely was not flagged. And then, so it's one thing about the arrest and the release in 2018, but then apparently in 2021, the Mounties were given some additional information and a request from Interpol, and they began to conduct covert surveillance on what they thought was his home or his address in Carbonear. So there's still a lot of gaps here, and you say, we're talking about Canadian Border Services, but this also might further erode some of the faith that people have in the RCMP as well, which was many instances over the last however many years that have caused for some people to be concerned about the status and the preparedness and the integrity of some of the members of the RCMP and some of their leadership. Anything else you want to add to this one, Colin? Because it's a head shaker.
Yeah, he's in this country illegally, but he applies for and would have received a social insurance number. You had to have identification for that. Then he would have had to apply for a driver's license from this province. He gets that. He had to show ID for that. At no point during the gathering of these these IDs to prove who he is, and he's using his real name. At no point is the federal government or the provincial government doing any kind of check on him, immigration status. He's not a Canadian citizen. So that would lead me to question, when he's applying for a social insurance number, well, he's applying for a job. So you're not a Canadian, so what's your immigration status? You got to have a work visa to work here, or you got to be here on a student visa or as a refugee or, something like that, right? None of that gets flagged. I just find that astounding. The RCMP arrests him so they know who he is, and they release him back into the community, and he's here illegally. He should have been immediately apprehended and turned over to Border Services. That's just astounding, Patty, right?
Well, every ball that was in the air was dropped, clearly, across the board.
And he's a dangerous criminal. He's a child sex offender.
Understood.
I don't know.
Colin, I appreciate the time. They're flagging me off to the break here.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye. I mean, it truly is an alarming story. At every single turn, every single official that encountered Robert Land dropped the ball. It's as simple as that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk shelter standards with Jim Dinn. And then Bill has a bouquet to throw around to where we'll find out. Jerry Nees, the president of Rec NL. Of course, June is Recreation Month. And Clifford Small, of course, is the CPC member for Coast to Base Central Notre Dame. I guess we're talking federal fisheries. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Say good morning to the NDP member for St. John Centre. He's the leader of the party. That's Jim Dinn. Good morning, Jim. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Where are we going?
Well, I want to talk about shelter standards, and I was listening to your interview, your conversation with Gregory yesterday, and then the follow-up call with the nurse who was with her the experience of her daughter and addictions recovery. And one of the things that she said that struck me was about the need for a place to live once you come out of that recovery process. We've encountered that as well. But Gregory's story. Is one of the campers who was set up, tenters who was set up down at the Colonial Building and now up at the Grace General parking lot there. And I was there when the police came to evict them. It was a miserable day. And I can't help but think that somehow shelter standards could have prevented some of it. But I've been thinking, Patty, since yesterday, if they're trying to determine if government is just callously indifferent, if it's willfully ignorant, or it's just a lack of political will. When they move people out from the Colonial Building in May, I could have predicted, and they should have known what was going to happen. People weren't going into shelters because they're unsafe, and it was only a matter of time before people coalesced around another site, and the Grace General Hospital site in this case, but they've been elsewhere throughout the city. I know some people managed to get them up to Pippi Park, but that's temporary. Now, I spoke to the minister there 2 nights ago at another event, and I let him know my displeasure, and his comment to me, Minister Abbott, was that, well, they're just enforcing the rules that are set out. Now, the irony of this, I have to say, is that, if we had shelter standards, if only they took the same, I guess, the same approach, the same enthusiasm with shelter standards, we could probably make sure that people are safe in these places. But, they came up with these regulations to move people out of the government property within a day, and they had them people moved off. So,
but I guess on that front, Jim, that was a simple matter of enforcing the current laws that are on the books.
No, they had to create those. Those regulations came in, and if you check the Newfoundland Gazette, on the very day that they moved in is the day that those regulations were gazetted. So they were newly minted as such. That's my issue here.
Yeah, but that's my point is, though, Jim, is that's the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? That's nothing to that. It's simply gazette it, call the RNC, case closed. When in fact the issue regarding housing and complex needs and emergency shelters is a bigger, different issue. The biggest problem that I guess currently in play is that the government told us they were working on setting these standards. The report was supposed to come out on the 3rd of June. It's the 27th. I haven't seen it.
And that, look, 2019, when I was first elected, I attended a public meeting with Allison in her district. That was the stabbing outside of a shelter on Bond Street. Now, that's 2019, and before that, the conditions weren't any better, not just in that, in any of the shelters. 2019, Patty, I appreciate the comment that like it was simply a matter of changing regulations, but we've had 5 years. We've known this. We've had the case of Raina Dove, where the judge very clear the murder of Raina Dove in a shelter in Cookstown, well, another shelter in my district, where he said that basically it was activated by fear, afraid of the living conditions. I've got a young gentleman who, for the first time, is finding himself in the shelter system, and he's talking about how he feels overwhelmed, lost, hopeless. The shelter's got a negative impact on me. It's chaotic and not sleeping well. We've got an older gentleman who's been harassed and bullied to the point where he's been sleeping outside. We've got that's 3 people that I can think of right there among others. And then we have I go back to May. There's a report by the Canadian Medical Association Journal, which points. And this is the hard part as well, that people experiencing homelessness develop geriatric syndromes and medical conditions that occur more commonly in older age. So they age faster, basically. But the other thing they point out is that the proportion of 50 people in 50 years of age and older and using shelters has increased, and the shelters are not adequately designed and resourced to meet the needs of older adults. Now, back in I guess October, when this became the light and people got to see inside of these shelters, it should have been a massive priority to get these out ASAP, at least something in the interim. I've been asking various ministers of housing since I was first elected, do you inspect these places? Do you keep track of them? Do you even make sure that the conditions are up to standard? And time after time, we have never gotten a clear answer. So, what precipitated these shelter standards? The only thing I can think of is that people were camping out on their doorstep, and that seemed to be the motivation. But I will say this: if we do not want people living in the tents and public land, if we want them to be safe, then I think at the very least, if we're going to put them in shelters, we have a duty, government has a duty to make sure that they are as safe as possible so that people don't end up murdered there, don't end up being harassed, don't have their mental health threatened, and at least so that they're safe. I'll keep on pointing this out, but I don't know how much longer I need to point this out to get this a priority, so that if June 3rd, was the deadline. We're going into a month after the fact. It should have been done. It should have been done a lot sooner than even May 3rd, for that matter.
Sure, but I mean, this, even if we implement and enforce some shelter standards, the fact of the matter is the conversation that we're not having is why are we doing it the way we're doing it, period. So only province in the country paying private landlords to have emergency shelters, and it's costing millions of dollars. The outcomes are terrible. The situations are desperate. So, you know, regardless if we talk about standards and how much money, the fact of the matter is the process and the policy is deeply flawed, period. That's the conversation we're not having. And
I agree. You could totally agree with that. Look, we had in the Grace General Hospital site, it would have been an ideal place for like a mixed affordable housing, supportive. There are models out there, and by the way, I'm not a fan of the emergency shelters or even the bed sit rooms. I really think people need to have a place that they can lock a door, they can have a kitchen. You don't need anything big. Similar to like we've done with St. Vincent de Paul, similar approach. But there is a better way to do it. But putting people in the shelters and throwing more money, millions of dollars into the shelter system, which is not helping people, it's probably making their mental health and their homelessness worse, is not the answer. I totally agree with that, Patty. But until right now, I'd rather at least make sure people are safe. But there is a conversation we need to have. There is a company here, I think, Homeworks, that makes modular homes. There are solutions here that could at least give people affordability for those who are on modest or low income. But for those who are going through the cycle of homelessness, well, then what else do we need other than shelters? Because certainly the Canadian Medical Association recognizes that this is not the solution. This is not making people's mental health improving it. It's making it worse, and actually the comorbidities with it are increasing. So if that's not a wake-up call to not only bring shelter standards in but find a better solution, and now I'm hearing that they had a plan and we're following up with this ourselves, to set up a campsite up at the far end of Pippi Park for the people who are homeless. So. And I don't know what to make of that, because on one hand, putting people in tents is still not safe, and this the best solution. If these are the best solutions we've come up with, it shows an incredible lack of imagination on the part of government. I'll say that.
Last one before I really do have to go. If people are talking, well, how much are we going to spend to try to help these people? And sometimes people take offense to these people being used, and people know what I'm trying to get at here. Yeah. If we look at it, the report that came from the teaching hospital in Toronto is crystal clear. Looking at 1,000 admissions. If you're homeless, you're quite likely to stay in hospital twice as long, costing twice as much. You put that amount of money into the housing conversation, and we're coming ahead of the game. We're going to be up money. Forget societal issues and moral responsibility and crime and punishment and healthcare and homelessness and complex needs and affordable housing. The fact of the matter is, if we just look at healthcare and the implication for the homeless population in the country, we are coming up money if we deal with it and put housing in place. It's just as fundamental as that. Jim, I do have to go, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Take care, Paddy.
You too. Bye-bye. Jim Dinn, NDP member, St. John Centre, and, of course, leader of the party. And, look, don't take my word for it. That research is out there. So let's just see what the costs are, right? The cost to house people and have the required supports, whether it be for mental illness and or addiction. And if we look at what it's costing inside of hospitalizations, we're going to be up money. Things would be better. And, you can say at some point socialism is going to fail and all that rest of that. But just pragmatically speaking, if we're talking dollars and cents, there's a win to be had here. Let's take a break. When we come back, Jerry Nee, you stay right there. He's the president of RecNL. And Clifford Small, of course, the CPC member for Costa Bay Central Notre Dame. Bill's got a bouquet. Robert wants to talk about the COD moratorium and whatever you want to talk about right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the programme. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Conservative Party of Canada member for Costa Bay Central Notre Dame. That's Clifford Small. Good morning, Cliff. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How you doing?
Doing okay. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks. I'm just calling in to make a few comments on what was touted yesterday as the reopening of the northern cod fishery, Paddy.
Okay, where do you want to start?
Well, it's not a reopening of the northern cod fishery. A minuscule 5,000 tons of extra cod, which will amount to. I've been hearing numbers from stakeholders that the folks who depended on cod through the stewardship fishery over the last several years may get an extra £1,500 per enterprise, which is absolutely nothing. And I heard you in your preamble talking about NAFO now being able to get in and get a share. You know, if that fishery had stayed classified as a stewardship fishery versus calling it a commercial fishery, NAFO would have been blocked out.
Yeah,
so now the door is open.
It's a genuine concern. I mean, add to the fact we're not even sure who's going to fish the percentage going to the indigenous communities that are new in the thick of it, which is likely going to be fished by the offshore. So the technicality of lifting the moratorium and making it commercial is absolutely a problem in this decision, no question.
And I'm hearing nothing but discontent, Paddy. I know there's been some positive things said about this move. That I'm sure it's a little bit politically generated to say, you know, every party wants to be able to say they've reopened the cod fishery after 32 years of moratorium. But the fact is, it's not a reopening. The union, the FFAW, wanted 25,000 tons. And the way that it's chopped up has, especially island fishermen, are roaring mad because now they're blocked out of fishing where they traditionally fished as far back as the cod fishery went in 2J. So it's causing division amongst regions, in fact, Paddy. There is never going to be a perfect solution to any single issue in the fishery. I mean, things like body up and bycatch, things like that, the practical things that we can take care of to make things easier and less costly for harvesters, those types of things I think are the low-hanging fruit that for some reason we don't attack. We go after these big headline grabbers. I think there's probably a conversation to be had just based on what TFO says. Now, we have to also include and acknowledge the anecdotal evidence. We have to include what the harvesters see insofar as the plentifulness of cod and the size and what have you. But DFO says no growth in the stock since 2016, which leads to, I think, a reasonable discussion as to whether or not this was even required at this moment in time. Now, the exploitation rate is pretty low when you talk about the strength of the spawning biomass, period. But there's a lot of questions to be answered around this one. There are a lot of questions to be answered, Paddy. But, you know, I talked to a lot of the stakeholders, fishermen who are at sea. Right now, shrimp fishermen are 100 miles east of St. Anthony trying to catch a few shrimp. They're pulling back their trawls, and anywhere that a codfish can stick in, even though those trawls are rigged out for conservation to avoid bycatch, if there's anywhere, even on the trawl doors, if there's somewhere that a fish can snag up, there's codfish coming up. And the guys are seeing marks of codfish, and they know what they're looking for because they target fish. They target codfish. So they know what 20 fathoms deep of codfish looks like on the bottom. And, you know, the northern cod zone reaches basically from Cape Spear to Nain. It's a massive, massive area. And talking to a lot of crab fishermen in 3K this year, they haven't even been able to fish their traditional depths because there's so many codfish getting into their crab pots and eating the bait. Paddy, I fished crab offshore for 9 years as a skipper myself. I saw 2 codfish in 9 years in crab pots. I've had pictures sent to me this year by fishermen in 3K with as high as 6 and 7 codfish in one crab pot. So, and healthy, fat fish. You know, if fish wasn't there, then these offshore fishermen wouldn't be tortured by the large schools of codfish.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't matter what I saw last year in the recreational food fishery. And, of course, this is kind of even silly to say, but we were getting our 15 snap like that, and all biggest dogs.
Yeah, and so the extra, so really we're looking at 19,000 tons. If we could have had another 6,000 or 7,000 tons to be spread out amongst the 3L and 3K harvesters, and not only that, I've got a couple of fish plants. Well, Fogo Island Co-op relies heavily on cod landings, and Comfort Cove has put in $1 million cod line this year. And when I drop down to the plant in Comfort Cove, the workers are talking about the extra hours that they need for EI. I mean, another 3 or 4 weeks of cod fishing would go a long ways to help out the situation in the fish plants. It's absolutely disgusting what's happened here. And, you know, Jack Daly continuously comes on your show from Oceana. Well, who do you think funds Oceana, Patty?
I don't know, but you're saying his science is bought and paid for?
So I got a list of some that your listeners might be familiar with. Bloomberg, Moore Foundation, Leonardo DiCaprio, Rockefeller, Packard Foundation, Tiffany and Company Foundation, Walton Family. You know, these are all $500,000 plus U.S. sponsors that are clear to see on their website. Now, Oceana has absolutely zero science. And when we talk about climate change, global warming, it's blamed for everything except the fact that the water in our bays is so warm now that it's too warm for Caitlin to come to the beach. And if they don't roll in the beach, Oceana's screaming saying there's no Caitlin. You talk to guys who are traveling back and forth from their harbors to their fishing ground 100 miles offshore, you know, in Conception Bay, Trinity Bay, Bonavista Vista Bay, Notre Dame Bay, White Bay. These guys are seeing walls of Caitlin on their sonars. And they know what Caitlin look like because they fished them. And for Oceana to be squawking the way they're squawking, to shut down the Caitlin fishery when they have no science, they're just trying to raise money from the same philanthropists that shut down our seal hunt, and they don't want a cod fishery. It's absolutely sickening to people who look at the economic value that the fishery returns and that it can return.
I think marine biologists, marine scientists would be by nature conservationists. So there's also, I think, you know, people have concern with the precautionary approach or precautionary policy that's being implemented in certain species. I think it's undeniable. I mean, the temperature of the water, regardless of who you're going to vote for politically, the temperature is what the temperature is. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from history. When we fished the way we did in the 80s, what happened? And so it's fine to be bullish on economic return, but economic return in the long term has to be carefully managed. And of course, we did not carefully manage it. And consequently, 32 years later, people are applauding a 5,000-ton increase in the TAC. So I don't know. I mean, if the science is bought and paid for, I think a lot can be said for that. You know, we're talking about, you know, paid piper kind of stuff, but the science should be based on science, not based on politics, not based on who your donors are.
No, and the science is extremely weak. Last year, the trawl survey was done 4 weeks early. And if you go back to the traditional migration patterns of cod, Paddy, in October, you couldn't get a codfish in the bays. They were migrating off to the banks. This year, in December even, long after the early trawl survey was done, tour hunters in Notre Dame Bay and Green Bay and White Bay were seeing massive marks of codfish on their sounders while they were out hunting tours. And the catch rates in the gill nets with only 12 hours soak time, my goodness, up to 1,800 pounds out of a net. When I was a young fella in 83 and 84, and we were fishing nets in the bays with 48 hours soak time and happy to get 100 pounds out of a net. So that's another thing. The science that the stewardship fishery was yielding was completely disregarded in the setting of this cod quota, Paddy. And as you said, the exploitation rate 3%, 3.5%, and the science itself has said that it's negligible.
Fair enough. Anything else you want to add this morning, Cliff?
No, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come on here, and I'm on the side of the stakeholders who are the guardians of the resource. They're stewards. They, you know, back when the moratorium was called, these not maybe these same fishermen, but it's in their lineage, it's in their family and relatives that fished the waters. They were calling for a reduction in cod fishing. Right now, these same stakeholders are asking for an increase, and they wouldn't be asking for it if the fish wasn't there, Paddy. They know it's there. DFO science has failed them, and the Liberal government, after 9 years and 6 fisheries ministers, have been a complete failure to the fishing industry in Atlantic Canada.
Is it not fair to say that the Conservative Party, when last in power, gutted a lot of the scientific capacity?
Well,
because that happened.
That's not entirely accurate. And so here we are right now, where DFO has had a doubling of their budget and a 50% increase in their staff. They couldn't come out with a management plan till the last week of June with all that personnel. Where's their science? It's absolutely ridiculous to come out with a cod management plan. Instead of being able to come out with it in May, they sat on data from the inshore for the stewardship cod fishery. They sat on that data for 4 years. I've got an order paper question that I got back in November that showed that they hadn't analyzed the data from the inshore fishery in 4 years. So I can't see where they're doing. They've had 9 years to make it better. If Liberals are complaining about us, their track record is far worse.
I appreciate the time, Cliff. Off we go.
Take care. Thanks.
You too. Bye-bye. It's Clifford Small. He's the CBC member for Coastal Bay Central, Notre Dame. Jerry Nee, appreciate your patience. He's the president of Recanel. He's next. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the president of Recreation Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Jerry Nee. Good morning, Jerry. You're on the air.
Morning, Paddy, sir. How are you?
Couldn't be better. How about you?
Not too bad.
So, go right ahead. Sorry, Jerry.
Recreation month there coming up this month of June. It's an opportunity for, I guess, a lot of the municipalities and recreation commissions across Newfoundland and Labrador to, I guess, kind of highlight some of the fun and exciting things that they're doing in their own communities and for some of their own residents.
Such as? Give us a few examples of what you've heard throughout the month.
So some of the things that we're seeing folks that are promoting right now, we find that a lot of people look at recreation and they sort of think sports, but, we look at it as, we provide the sports fields, the parks, the playgrounds, the walking trails, the community gardens, even just getting out and sitting down in your backyard, reading a book, Paddy, is a great way to find you time, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, for a lot of people listening to the program this morning, some form of recreation is their escape. It's not just about getting your heart rate up and trying to lose weight or to get stronger or to run in the telly 10. It's just that mental escape associated with just going out and doing something.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we've been pushing, especially in the last number of years through Recreation NL, is the U time. We did recently launch a new program or a new initiative actually that we're running on our social media campaign called That's Recreation. So what we're doing is we're encouraging a lot of our ambassador communities to send in some videos and some clips of what they're doing in their own communities. So we've got our most recent video was uploaded there in early June. We're seeing seniors wellness fitness sessions. We're seeing people that are doing kayaking. We're seeing people out hiking. There's a video of some kids playing some beach volleyball. I think there's even a video of a convention or a conference happening in the community across Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, I was at a convention around this time last year, and what they did is akin to like a 7th inning stretch at a ball game. Right in the middle of the conference, someone went up and we did just a little bit of mild calisthenics. I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's what we find is, a lot of people that are doing conferences and conventions now are reaching out to us and asking, do you have a member in your in this area that can come in, maybe do a little active session break for us, or even getting in people to come in and talk about some of the benefits and the work-life balance kind of thing.
Do you have formal relationships or partnerships with different entities, like, say, for instance, I know it's not only sports, but the Sport NL and or Seniors NL, those types of things where you're working in conjunction with them to whether bring your expertise to bear and or to help devise programs? Is there anything like that in place?
Yes, we work very closely with Sport NL and School Sports NL. As well, we work closely with Municipality NL and the Professional Municipal Administrators Association, just to kind of, I guess, let a lot of those members know what we do. But a lot of similar people that are attending those conferences, and we work very closely with a lot of those groups.
As you should, because, I try to sneak in a bit of recreation, and it's one thing for me to try to curb my big front porch, but quite another just to get some fresh air and to try to leave the show behind or whatever else.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it goes back to what we say. It's about making you time.
And as they say, and I think justifiably so, the toughest step is the first step. Once you get into a routine, it just becomes part and parcel of your day.
Absolutely, that's right. You got to make it part of your day. Same thing, for a lot of us that sit in offices all day. It's just knowing that, that time is approached. It's time to get up, get clear of your computer monitor. Even just pop into a colleague's office just to stretch your legs, or get away from your desk for a little bit.
One thing that I have found, just personal, on a personal antidote, is it was recommended to me, like for instance, if I'm just going to go for a couple of tours around Kent's Pond, just to get out, just to get active, it really helped when I started to leave my phone behind. Because what I found myself doing is with my head down looking at my phone as I make my way around the pond, as opposed to putting the bloody thing away just for a little bit of relief from it, because I'm like most people, the phone is in my hand or close by far too often throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, I don't know if we really know where that balance is at yet, but hopefully we can all take that cue. And when you're out doing your you time, certainly leave your phone behind your door.
I appreciate the time, Jerry. Happy Recreation Month.
Perfect. Thanks, Paddy.
All the best. Bye bye. As Jerry Nee, the NL president, the president of Rec NL. And again, I think we all probably spend a little bit too much time on our phones. And just in the world of organised sports, want to say good luck and go get them to the Newfoundland Labrador Soccer Association Girls Under 13 and U14 teams competing in the Atlantics this weekend on the brand new turf field in Gander. Go get them and good luck. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Bill. You're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I just wanted to... hang on, I'll take you off speaker. There we go. I just wanted to pass along some accolades and congratulations and gratitude to the planning committee that's put off an exceptional grad ceremony for our grade 12 grads in St. Kevin's High School yesterday evening and last night. My son Seamus graduated, and I tell you, the parents committee that's put it off done a phenomenal job. It's something that no one was there will ever forget, especially the grads, their members, forever.
What made it phenomenal?
Well, let's see. Last evening, up to the school, they had a meet and greet for all the parents and grads and all the teachers and stuff, and they had photographers at Colonial Building where the students went out and got a bunch of class pictures took. Then down at the hockey rink here in the Goulds, they had had tents set up inside, like the outdoor tents, like you see. Right from the doorway, when they had it all, the whole stadium where they were too dressed up and tables laid out and everything decorated just so. It was I can't describe everything they had, but it was fantastic. And the planning they put into the march where the students came in, and it was just fantastic. It really was. I got to say, they did an excellent job, and it was so good to see the graduating class. I mean, many of them who started from kindergarten and went right on up together. It was really, really heartwarming. I got to say, my hat's off to him.
Yeah, it's a special event, no doubt about it. What's next for Seamus? What's he doing next year?
Seamus is a really talented artist, and he's looking at doing a fine arts program and see where that takes him. He's the kind of person, he can look at something and sketch it or get something in his head and draw it up. I mean, he draw a picture of someone he saw a picture of, and if it's someone as well known, no trouble at all to pick out who it is, or he got sketchbooks of sci-fi stuff and all the monsters and that he's after drawing. There's a frightened life at you. It's really, he'll do really well with it.
Where does he plan on doing this fine arts program?
He's talking about one at Kona.
Okay. Well, wish him good luck for me, and I appreciate the time, and I'm sure the bouquet is most welcome by the organising committee.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Paddy. You have a good day.
You too, Bill. Bye-bye.
Cheers, bye.
All right, there you go. So let's see here. Let's take a break. When we come back, Robert's in the queue. He wants to talk about the cod moratorium having been lifted. And Mike Murray is a retired Crown attorney, wants to talk about that story about Robert Land, convicted American child sexual abuser, that for years, apparently he was in Ontario for years before he made it to this province, but eventually captured in Carbonear, now awaiting extradition proceedings. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Robert, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello there.
Yes, I'd like to speak about the cod moratorium being lifted after 32 years.
Sure.
John Crosby took it on the chin 32 years ago. I've been listening to this story all my life, and the biggest problem is the harp seals are up there about 25 years old, killing the cod way up north. The whole Atlantic Ocean could be filled with cod if they had a massive culling of the seals, and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
Well, we've certainly talked about it extensively on this show.
Well, you know something? It has to be emphasized that the harp seals are probably 20, 25 years old. We're up there north. 8 million seals that are killing a lot of the cod way up north. And they got no plastic in their, these cod way up north, they got no plastic in their bodies, that people don't want to eat it because they're eating plastic.
People don't want to eat what?
The cod that are down here farther south in the Atlantic Ocean, have been proven that they have, had plastic and eaten everything that you can. But the main problem, and everybody knows it, do they think that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are stupid that we need a massive culling of the seals? I've been listening for 30-odd years. Conservationists are causing a lot of the problem, and world hunger, may be one of the causes. I think the Atlantic Ocean could, if they culled all the seals, the Atlantic Ocean would be filled with cod. Do you believe that?
Well, certainly the cod stock would improve quicker with a reduction in the number of seals, and you don't have to go that far north to encounter the seal herds either. So the problem with all of that is nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to call for the sake of. Well, I mean, I guess I can't be definitive, but I'm going to guess that there's a 99.9% chance that nobody's going to enter into a seal cull just because.
Well, if the government thinks they're going to get votes from Newfoundlanders and Labradorians because they're dropping the moratorium, they got something else coming to them, I'll tell you right now, because Newfoundlanders and Labradorians know exactly all about the cod industry and the seal culling, and the main problem are the 20 and 25-year-old seals up there killing all the cod before it gets down south.
Yeah, but there isn't a party in the country talking about culling seals.
Well, maybe the PC party, when they gets in after Trudeau is gone, maybe there might be something done about it.
Well, if they actually plan on it, it might be interesting for them to actually say it.
That's all I got to say, Paddy. I've been listening to this for 30 years, and nobody seems to, I'm speaking on, I'd like to be speaking on everybody in Newfoundland and Labrador in the cod industry. They know better. The seals have to be culled, and I think the Atlantic Ocean will be filled back with cod if they were culled.
Appreciate the time, Robert. Thanks for the call.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt or misunderstanding about what seals eat. I think people understand, but there's a distinct difference when our DFO talks about seals. When we talk about the Gulf seal, and of course, they're a problem there in the Gulf, but apparently not here. And how can that possibly be the case? Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Mike Murray. You're on the air.
Yeah, hi. How are you, Patty?
I'm doing fine, Mike. How about you?
Good. I initially listened in this morning. I wanted to see what people were saying about the codfish. I mean, to me, that seems like a political stunt and not necessarily in the best interest of the resource. But anyway, while I was listening, I heard somebody call in about this American fellow out in Harbor Grace. What's his name? Robert Land?
Robert Land, that's right.
Yeah, so I retired as a Crown Attorney about 6 months ago. I just wanted to put out a few basic facts about I don't know anything about Buddy's case, but there's a few basic things, I guess, that everybody needs to understand. The first of which is that on any given day, there's thousands of warrants outstanding across Canada. And also, they're really expensive to execute. I mean, you just think about all the Newfoundlanders who went to Alberta to go to work and left, say, a drink and a driving charge or something like that behind. Okay. And, they get picked up they run a red light in Alberta and the warrant's out there, and the Alberta police will call here and say, do you want to pay $15,000 to get them back? And the Mounties or the RNC say, we can't afford that. Or the other way around, people come back to Newfoundland after getting laid off in Alberta and leave a charge or two outstanding there. So at any given time, there's thousands of warrants across the country that are active. And also, they're really expensive to execute. I mean, all you got to do is think back to last year and that guy Sheldon Hibbs. I mean, he kicked up a fuss getting on. You got to send 2 cops up to get the guy. You got to pay for hotels. You got to pay for airfare. The way the criminal code works is that if you execute a warrant, you only got 6 days to go and get the guy. So or else the police who arrested him have to release him. So you got to buy full fare tickets. You got to pay for hotels. It's not cheap. That Sheldon Hibbs guy, remember, he made a fuss getting on the plane, and they had to charter a plane to get him back. He was charged with murder. It cost $80,000 to get him back, and there was a big fuss about that. So there's always more warrants than there is money to go and get the people.
But this would be on the U.S. Marshal's dime, though, right?
Yeah. So I mean, here's the deal with this. So the Mounties pick them up in Harbor Grace 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, the first thing they do is call the Americans and say, do you want to come and get them? And if the Americans say, boy, we didn't even know he was gone, we're not interested. And then they'll call Canadian Border Services and they'll say, we got nobody in our office that can go out to Harbor Grace and get him. Why don't you give him a piece of paper and tell him to turn himself in at immigration here in St. John's?
But they did know he was gone.
Yeah, okay, but maybe they weren't willing to get him. I mean, maybe they've had a change in administration or a change in policy down there, and now they're willing to come and get him. But, I mean, the way warrants work, if nobody's willing to come and get somebody, you got no authority to hold on to them.
Is there, and this is a question based on ignorance because I don't know the answer, is there not different priorities given to different warrants? It's one thing if you skipped out on a...
Oh, I agree 100%.
Petty larceny versus the fact that he sexually abused a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, but I mean, remember the big fuss in the Hughes inquiry? The Department of Justice knew Christian brothers outside the jurisdiction who had abused people and wouldn't authorize anyone to go and get them. You know, I mean, there's a bureaucracy behind the actual law enforcement aspects that people involved in law enforcement got no control over.
Yeah, and I think this story gets even a little bit more confusing given a couple of things. He had his social insurance number, even though there was a warrant for his arrest out there. Interpol was involved, the U.S. Marshal Service was involved, the law enforcement in Maricopa County in Arizona were involved. So he applied for a social insurance number, got a Newfoundland and Labrador driver's license, was driving a truck for a paving company. The Americans were told 6 years ago he was here. He was arrested in 2018 and released. So there's just a lot of really confusing moving parts as to how many balls got dropped here.
Well, you know, there's obviously a lot, but I mean, the Mounties kept picking them up and calling someone to go and get them, and nobody would come. How many more Robert Lands are out there with social insurance numbers and driver's licenses?
It's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, that's the real question. Not. Once the Mounties pick somebody up and say, "Is anybody coming to get them?" and nobody's willing, then they got no choice but to release them.
So, does extradition have to require the U.S. wanting to get him, or can we simply deport him?
Well, I mean, Canadian Border Services could have deported him. Sure, they could have. I mean, he's in the country illegally. But 9 times out of 10, they'll try and do that with a piece of paper. They don't go around and execute warrants because they've never had the funding and the manpower to do it.
Yeah, so he's not going to be back in court until the 8th of July, I'm pretty sure, to determine whether or not he's going to be released. It'll be fascinating to see how that's handled there, because if it's not the extradition proceedings being executed, then we're just spinning our wheels. It's yet another warrant that goes unsatisfied.
Yeah, well, I mean, let me just take you back to another high-profile case, Shirley Turner. I mean, she'd been ordered extradited for murder, and the Newfoundland Court of Appeal released her on bail.
I remember the story.
Yeah,
the tragedy that it was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts there, and there's a lot of issues in the system, and I'm sure there are thousands of people who are under the radar.
Mike, how long were you in the Crown Attorney's office?
Oh, I'd say over 25 years.
And, you know, we heard from the lead prosecutor talk about just the number of active files for heinous crimes, you know, attempted murders and murders, and whether or not the resources were in place, you know, further complications with the Jordan ruling, whether or not we're going to be able to hit those time targets. What was your experience in the recent past? You know, say some story.
I mean, when I retired there at the end of last year, I mean, the average prosecutor is carrying about 200 files. Anything from, you know, theft on one end to murder on the other end. I mean, they don't give murders to the junior prosecutors, but everybody's carrying a lot of files. And the whole thing, I mean, you take some of the cases that have been in the media lately with disclosure issues like that. That teacher guy, or that's charged with all the sexual assaults.
Marcus Hicks, yeah.
Yes. Now, let's say apparently there's a lot of surveillance video or whatever, like video that he took himself. I mean, someone's got to watch thousands of hours of that before it can be turned over. And, I mean, where are the resources coming from for that? Or you take these days... I mean, which wasn't the case 30 years ago. I mean, police will seize cell phones, and then there's 10,000 pages of text messages that somebody's got to go through inch by inch before they can be disclosed. And there's no extra resources for that. There's no paralegals to do that. That's all on the guy who's got a trial the next day for someone charged with assaulting his wife, and a trial the day after for a robbery at a convenience store, and a trial the day after that for something else, who's got to fit it all in.
How many people working in the office as attorneys?
I'd say in the St. John's office, close about 20, another 4 or 5 down the special prosecutions, another 15 or 20 spread across the island.
What constitutes a special prosecution?
That's just a guess. What's that?
What constitutes special prosecutions?
Special prosecutions, they generally, their main mandate would be to do appeal stuff in like the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court of Canada. But they also take on trials too where the local crown might have a conflict. Let's say your brother-in-law gets charged with drinking and driving, or when a police officer's got to be prosecuted, or just they might pitch in on a homicide when everybody else just has too much going on.
So, if I hear you correctly, the caseload is unmanageable, or?
I would say close to unmanageable. I mean, we've been very lucky here in Newfoundland on the Jordan situation. Not too many serious charges have had to be thrown out. I mean, you hear in Ontario and BC about sexual assaults and even homicides getting chucked out. We've been pretty lucky here. There hasn't been too many cases, serious cases, that have been thrown out.
Well, and some of the problems on the mainland is the shortage of judges.
Well, yeah, and there's vacancies in the Supreme Court here too, but a lot of it is here. I got to hand it to the provincial court. They've been really proactive, and I mean the Supreme Court is a different story. But provincial court, you can get a trial in 3 or 4 months generally once everything is ready to go. They've been really proactive in terms of what they'll do. Let's say there's 7 courtrooms in St. John's. They'll book 10 or 12 trials on the assumption that some of them won't go ahead. And sure enough, some of them don't. And occasional time something gets bumped, but as a general rule, the works pretty good, and the judges push things forward. They do a good job of that. The provincial court, like the current chief judge, Fowler, and previous chief judges have done a good job of making sure that the provincial court system ticks over pretty smoothly. The Supreme Court is a bit of a disaster. It's empty every day when you go in there. But if you go in, and like a couple of years ago, I had a trial, a guy who was the getaway driver in an armed robbery. It was a 2 or 3 day trial. Well, you got to add an extra day for Supreme Court because everything moves so much slower there. So then that's 4 days. And but still, it was like 10 months or a year down the road before I could get 4 days for a trial. Whereas in provincial court, you could have done the trial in 2 days, and you could have a trial in 3 months.
Why does it move so much slower in Supreme Court?
Because it appears that the Supreme Court administration doesn't take the Jordan ruling very seriously. I mean, they book things one at a time, and let's say you got a 6-month civil trial over some construction contract gone awry. If the parties settle it the day before the trial, then I mean that's just 6 months. Somebody of nothing happening. They're not aggressive with how they deal with things. They're very ceremonial and bureaucratic. The judges don't have there's exceptions, but a lot of the judges don't have any criminal law experience, and they're very tentative and very nervous about doing stuff. I mean, you take an average case in Supreme Court or versus provincial court. Somebody pleads guilty to a really serious offense, a manslaughter or a string of armed robberies. Provincial court judge will give you a decision on the spot or in 3 days or in a week at the top end. In Supreme Court, they might put off their decision for 3 months because they don't have the confidence, they don't have the experience to rule more promptly.
Then leads to the conversation, I don't know if you want to pass comment on this, but it's the whole thought, and this will be part of the federal election campaign too, about the tough on crime and bail laws, and people say it's a revolving door and we're not sentencing people for long enough, even though we don't do much to rehabilitate them. We're pretty much of a punishment around here. Any thoughts on this soft or tough on crime conversation that's really happening right across the country, including here?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is just talk for votes. There's only so much you can do. I mean, the Supreme Court of Canada, about 6 or 8 years ago, started a campaign against people being denied bail. And there's not much that can be done about it unless the federal government wants to use the notwithstanding clause. There was a case called Myers about 8 years ago where a guy with outstanding firearms charges got into a high-speed chase with the cops where people shot at the cops. This was up on the mainland somewhere. And at his bail hearing, he said that he was planning to get counseling for his drug problem. And the Supreme Court of Canada said, well, by the time it got to them, he'd already pled guilty and served a sentence. But the Supreme Court of Canada said if I was the trial judge, I would ask more questions about his counseling program, and I would have given a strong consideration to letting him out, which is like the exact kind of person that the general public doesn't want on the street. And little by little over the past few years, they've chipped away at it. Like a classic example is there's a condition that usually goes on, or that used to usually go on bail releases, which is keep the peace and be a good behavior. And that's been interpreted to mean if you break the law and commit a new offense while you're out on bail for something else, then automatically your bail should be revoked and you should be brought before a court. And the Supreme Court of Canada said this unfair to vulnerable people, and it should only be imposed. It should only be imposed in the most extreme circumstances.
I would suggest it's unfair to the general public. I've really enjoyed the conversation, Mike, but I do have to get to my break.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, just to sum up, the Supreme Court of Canada has closed most of the doors on doing anything with bail. I mean, changing onuses and stuff like that is only going to make so much difference when the Supreme Court of Canada says just about everybody should be out on the street.
which is, I guess, why Mr. Polyev has talked about for the first time ever the federal government using the notwithstanding clause on this exact issue.
I mean, nobody's done it before. Because criminal law is not that big a vote getter, and because it'd be a big step. The federal government has never used the notwithstanding clause.
No, they haven't. For good reason, though, too, I would think. That's a bigger conversation.
100%. 100%. I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but
no, me neither.
I think that's a big jump that probably nobody will make, no matter how much noise he makes about it.
Appreciate your time on the call. Thanks, Mike.
Okay,
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, that was interesting. Let's take a break. When we come back, Mount Terrace School and the roads. Where? We'll find out. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Mary. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing fine, thank you, honey.
Great.
It seems like you're the only one who can get things rocking and rolling for anybody.
Depends.
This here, Patty, from Beatty Bird, the roads from Beatty Bird to Old Perlican, you have no idea what they're like. And if something doesn't soon get done with them, somebody's going to either get... It's going to be a big disaster. Someone's either going to get killed or hurt very seriously. No matter which way you're going, coming and from Beatty Bird to Old Perlican, you have... Well, it's just impossible. Like, there's holes like you wouldn't believe. And I mean, we're not talking little holes. We are talking something that's totally unreal.
As a matter of fact, Mary, someone sent me a picture of that exact stretch of road not that long ago, and the picture showed one massive chunk right out of the pavement on the shoulder of the road. It's hard to tell by the photo, but it looked like it was probably a foot or more into the highway and probably 2 or 3 feet wide. It was a massive chunk missing from the side of the road.
And honest to God, it's on both sides. Like, it's really, really getting bad. And, like, you're going to get your person that's going to pull out to pass and go down one of them holes. And God knows what it's going to cause. John Effort's at the head of that, isn't he?
John Effort, he's the Minister of Transportation, yep.
My God, I wish you would do something, Patty, because, like, I'm not exaggerating. I really am not.
Well, based on the picture I saw, I 100% agree with you. So, Mary, from Beatty Bird to Old Perlican, about 10, 12 minutes?
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
But it takes me and the old boy a good 15 minutes. We drive slow.
Yeah, like you should.
Yeah. And, like, it's just terrible. And I would never even mention the roads here in Beatty Bird. I don't know what they're doing here. Like, you go up the back road there. I mean, it's just holes and... big holes along the side of the thing. If you happen to go too close to the edge, you're off. I'm telling you, it's terrible, Patty. And they're going to have a good tourist season this year.
I don't know if that stretch of road is on the list for any road work. It's not, is it?
No, it's up to our town hall to look after that.
Okay.
But that's like talking to, light bulb that's been burned out.
I'll have a look at the provincial list about that stretch of highway, though, between Beatty Bird and Old Perlican during the news break.
And thank you so much, Patty Daly. And you and your wife and family have a nice Canada Day weekend.
The very same to you. Thank you, Mary.
And take care. Thanks a lot.
You too.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Yeah, like talking to a light bulb that's been burnt out. Oh, my. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, still another full hour left for you. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the PC member for Topsail Paradise. He's the opposition education critic. That's Paul Dinn. Good morning, Paul. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
Thank you for the call.
No problem.
I just want to call in. I just want to offer some of my thoughts on the meeting that occurred the other night with parents at Mount Terrace. I mean, there was a good crowd there, given the weather, and it was good on the parent group to get not one, not two, but 3 ministers out to take questions and respond. And I think, gauging the room and speaking to parents afterwards, I think they were expecting a little bit more detail, and as opposed to some high-level timelines which were given in terms of when Kenmount Terrace would be open. And the ministers, by their own admission, said it's a very aggressive timeline, hoping to get the school open September of 26. Individuals in the audience, some who have construction experience, were very pessimistic about that and asked some very good questions. And but I guess the main focus of the meeting then took a turn to, well, what's happening in the interim? That's going to be at least 2 years, potentially 3 to 4, in terms of what's happening in the feeder system that's currently there. And a lot of questions asked, some sad situations presented. Some parents talked about children who have mobility issues and they're in wheelchairs who can't access the playgrounds, the play areas that they have. That was hard to hear. There's some very good questions about French immersion. There's a lot of children that go to Elizabeth Park for French immersion, and it's hopeful that Kenmount Terrace would have French immersion as well. But people talked about transportation and getting to those to Elizabeth Park, of which the response has been, well, you're not in the catchment area, but as the interim, maybe there's an ability there as a low-hanging fruit to put them in on a bus route, or put a bus to it to get those kids to French immersion while they wait for Kenmount Terrace to open. There's violence was another issue that was raised.
Before we move on past the French immersion stream, if I'm correct here, that makes some of the student forecast numbers kind of difficult to come up with, because if I'm right once again, aren't French immersion students allowed to go to whatever school? You don't have to be in the catchment area? Because where my boys go to school, or went to school in elementary school, there was kids from all over the place that weren't living in our neighbourhood. They came specifically for French. So isn't that the case? Period?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, because that was brought up, and in terms of the response, because some of the kids that would fall within the Kenmount Terrace zone are not only going to Elizabeth Park, but some, I believe, that, as they said, were Monday Pond. But I think the point being here is if the French immersion is going to be available in Kenmount Terrace, and you have people in that area who want to avail of that and are available elsewhere, wouldn't it make more sense to help transition them now in terms of getting the transportation to the schools they need, and down the road get them to Kenmount Terrace? I mean, this was the issue that people were talking about. Well, you're not in the catchment zone; it's your own responsibility to get them there. But one of the points that one of the parents made was, well, Elizabeth Park is just down the road. How come you can't provide busing to allow that? So that was one of the issues, as opposed to someone going across town to attend a French immersion program. But you're exactly right in terms of French immersion. But I mean, the point being here is that everyone should have that opportunity to take French immersion if they so choose. So it's just making it harder on some parents who, with the elimination of the 1.6 busing, are still having to drive their kids to a school that's basically a stone throw away from where Kenmount Terrace is going to be.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to the violence issue, and maybe give me some examples of what you thought were good questions or great questions coming from the floor.
Well, the issue was brought up from parents who have their children now moving into PwC, and they're fearful around, not being old enough to move in there and moving into a school that will be overcrowded by taking in the grade 9s. So, parents raised that issue. Some of the responses back was, from Minister Howell at the time, was that violence exists in all our schools. Which it does, but it's not something, appropriate answer, I think, for addressing some of the questions there. The follow-up was also that, some of the schools in the province are K to 12, and so they are. But those schools that are K to 12 have a much different full population and distribution of age groups. But for parents who were concerned about their children going to PWC now, they had valid concerns around violence. Now, I mean, you can say that the incident there earlier the year in PwC got a lot of media play and probably blew it out of proportion. But at the end of the day, any act of violence is something that needs to be addressed. So when parents brought up these issues the other night, I don't think I'm almost sure there was no definitive response to how that was going to be addressed. And when talking about the reconfiguration, and that the minister responded that they were focused on the reconfiguration more so and then they would focus on what is needed. But I would argue that two of those things go hand in hand. If you're looking at reconfiguration of catchment zone or where people are going to schools, then you also, at the same time, should be looking at, can it be done? What are the pros and cons? What are the things we put in place to mitigate any negative impacts? I mean, that all should be done. So I don't think the parents left, and certainly I had conversations afterwards with a lot of them, I don't think they left with a level of confidence that their issues were being addressed. And they had done up a handout that listed a number of the shorter term issues that they need addressed, and I know they've sent that into the minister now to get some definitive timelines and how these were going to be addressed. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about these things and talk about enrollment numbers, and the minister tells you, well, these are we can't predict what's going to happen in September. There's no magic 8 ball. Well, yes, that's true, but September's only 2 months away, and there's lots to be done there, and there's lots of suggestions and some responses, but I don't think they left there with a warm and fuzzy feeling that a lot of their issues were going to be addressed in time for this coming school year. And I mean, that's what's the key here. I think they've accepted that the Kemountir school, they're not going to have it for another 3+ years maybe, and if they can do it in the 2, well, wonderful. But they're really, really concerned about what the short-term measures are to ensure their kids are safe and getting a fulsome education.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to look at timelines for the construction of the new school, and we'll all find out at the exact same time when it's open, when the doors are open. But there are legitimate concerns about these school enrollment numbers, in whether it be Learysbrook or Larkhall Academy or St Andrews or PwC or whatever school we're talking about here. And, even some suggestions and references to portables. Well, I know the geography of some of these schools. I'm really very close to where I'm working right here this morning. There's no spot for the portables. Like, what are we talking about?
Well, I mean, when you even think about it, while I was waiting for this call, I was thinking about what has been done in the past with some of these things. You recall that the School for the Deaf has been utilized in many cases around construction of new schools. Are there other options out there similar to that? And I know in the cases when those schools were used, because it was construction of schools up in Paradise too, that parents were a little anxious about it, but it turned out to be a wonderful experience for them. So are there options like that can ease the burden on these schools in the next year or two? Or are there other schools in the area that are not at capacity that can do this? These are the discussions that need to be happening. And yes, they've offered some suggestions around playtime and taking part of the parking lot and the like. That's been out there, and you're right about portables, but has government explored all options to ensure that these schools are not overcrowded? And from what I understand, Learysbrook and Larkhall will be at all-time highs in enrollment this coming year. So, what's being done to address those issues? And, right now there's 2 months to do it. And come up with some responses. So do you, as the opposition critic, have any solutions that you want to propose? Did anyone that came to the meeting have anything that was, potentially helpful looking at September? Well, they did. There's a list they sent out. They did talk about portables and talked about like library space. They talked about maybe there's a reconfiguration of catchment areas that needs to be done for different schools in the areas. There were some solutions offered, and from what I understand, those have been sent in and looking for responses from government on these. So hopefully they'll come back and say if they're doable or not. And as I said, like even utilizing another place such as a school for deaf or somewhere else are some potential short-term solutions that can help this. But the parents, I must say, the crowd were very, and there was a good number of parents there. The crowd were very polite, I would say. There was nobody getting out of hand. They were asking some very good questions and offering very good comments. And the ministers were taking those down. I took as many notes as I could as well, and hopefully they're going to come back and have some answers in place that can help ease this. But right now, as the situation stands, a lot of parents are very not upset, but very, very much concerned about where their kids are going in the fall and the processes. And of course, this don't just fall on the parents and students. This is also strain on your teachers.
Oh yeah.
And our staff in the schools. When you are in schools that are overcrowded and you're talking about bullying and violence and kids can't walk the hallways without bumping into someone, that creates issues as well. So I'm hopeful that they're going to have a careful look at this and see if this reconfiguration with the numbers they're talking about is actually going to do good. And many people are doubtful.
We'll see. Paul, appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Paddy. Have a great day.
You too.
All the best.
Paul Dinn, the PC member for Topsail Paradise. Very quickly before we get to this break. So the birthday is not until Sunday, June 30th, but I've been asked to offer an early happy birthday to Nikita Bond. Hope you have a great day. Love, Sabrina, Michael, Caleb, Gideon, Mom, and Nan. Happy birthday, Nikita. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Simpson. You're on the air. Good morning, Simpson Butt on line number 5. You're on the air.
I'm here, Paddy. I'm Vincent.
Oh, Vincent, my apologies. It says Simpson on my screen, but Vincent, I know who you are. You're the gentleman who sent me the brochures.
Yes, I am.
Very well.
Did you have a good look at them?
I did so. As a matter of fact, there's one right in front of me. I had a good look at it yesterday. So whether it be the quaint little post office or Viola's General Store, the railway station, and on it goes. It looks like a lovely spot.
Yes, it is. That's why I wanted to give you a call and let you know that we're going to open this Wednesday, July the 3rd. We're opening until August the 27th. Now, we're closed on Monday and Tuesday because Monday and Tuesday sometimes we do bus tours because there's still a lot of people that likes to go on a bus tour and come out and visit. So,
and I should tell the people where we're talking about. We're talking about the Heritage Village out in Victoria.
Yes, we are.
Right.
Victoria Heritage Village, and it is a beautiful spot. Like some of our, say, for example, if you're looking at your brochure there, the POW camp.
Yes, sir.
That one is that was built there in 1940, and it was supposed to have 1,000 prisoners come out from St. John's to go there, and of course that didn't happen because Upper Canada and the States didn't want anyone here in Newfoundland, so they had to put the prisoners back on the boat and send them back to the mainland. But it sat there for 3 years, the prisoner of war camp, and the Heritage Village, that's the site that our buildings are on now. The site of where POW camp was, that's where the site is now of our Victoria Heritage Village. It's a beautiful spot. We, I don't know if you saw, we had Pauline Torniel out there a few years ago and did Land and Sea. Did you see it?
I did not.
And then we had Sharon Snow with Places to Go.
Love Sharon.
And she was great, and that gave us a lot of people coming to see our Heritage Village. And I just wanted to get it out there that if you got a day and you want to come out around the bay or from anywhere, Clarenville, whatever, and you want to spend a nice day and do a nice tour, well, here's the place to come, the Victoria Heritage Village.
Yeah, you got Newfoundland Pony on site named Jack, and apparently that beautiful little church. Can I actually get married in that church?
Yes, you can. We've had weddings. We've had weddings there, and we've also had some mock weddings too, but we've had weddings there. And we've got the two goats, Theodore and Petals.
Right.
And our Newfoundland pony, of course, is Jack. He's beautiful. He's all black, long black mane. And if you go down to the gate and you bring a few scraps with your potato scraps or just shake the bag, he'll come over and you can rub him down. He's a beautiful beautiful pony. And we got the like the Saltbox House. That's a replica of the first Saltbox House that was in Victoria. That one on the brochure there, and it's loaded inside with all kinds of antiques, everything about heritage. So that's a beautiful building. And 2 years ago, we did the village school. And now, of course, when the tours are going and people go in there, the first thing they want to do is sit down, read about Dick and Jane and Bunga. Now, I don't know if you're too young for Bunga, but they want to sit down in the chairs and look at the Bunga geography book and Dick and Jane. So they love that. Well, it's all beautiful, everything. We got the working forge. You can get your horse, you can get her shoed there. That's a working forge. And we have replicas of, like the first post office. That's roughly the size of the first post office that was in Victoria. And the railway station, that's here on the pamphlet, that's just down from where I live. That's where the train came down through, and that's where you got off for Victoria, down at the train station. Well, that one in the brochure is the exact replica of that train station.
It looks like a lovely spot, and it's located on Powerhouse Road, Route 70, so the Victoria Heritage Village. Anything else quick, Vincent, before I have to go?
Yeah, no, that's it. I just want to let your listeners know that if they got a nice day and they want to come out and have a tour, we've got tour guides for the summer. And like I said, it's a beautiful, beautiful spot to visit. All kinds of things to see and do.
Absolutely, Vincent. And the brochure is really quite nice. I appreciate the time, and thanks for sending these along.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Vincent. Take care. And good luck this
Appreciate
season. My pleasure. Bye-bye. Yeah, I can tell you by the look of the brochure, it looks like a lovely spot. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Labrador. That's Yvonne Jones. Good morning, Yvonne. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you today?
Okay, you?
Good. Things are looking a little better in Labrador overnight. Mother Nature has been somewhat cooperative with the weather, so the fire in Churchill Falls has now been reduced to a Category 1, and Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro have been able to restore power to all the customers in Labrador West area. Obviously, there's still a number of fires burning in Labrador. Some of them are in full form, I guess, in terms of requiring continuous dedication with water bombers at this point. But some are burning lower. They've been able to push them back, and some have been diverted just by natural weather patterns. But, it's continuing to be monitored, and I want to, certainly acknowledge the work that's being done by firefighters, by the water bomber crews, and by all the volunteers that have been supporting the communities in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Churchill Falls, Labrador West. Everybody has been outstanding. And I also want to acknowledge the tremendous work of the emergency measures team in Newfoundland and Labrador in the work they're doing. The Premier and Jennifer Williams at Newfoundland Labrador Hydro have been keeping the public informed with very informative updates, and emergency measures have been reaching out and ensuring that all of us are briefed and have an understanding of what next steps are and the progress that's being made to get these fires under control and to push them back and eventually put them out. And that's the goal right now.
I know they're working towards, a fire break, which is going to take days. Of course, that work has been abandoned given the fire has jumped the river. It's a wonder that hadn't been undertaken years prior, because we know how vulnerable the generating station would be to fire. That could be catastrophic. So fingers crossed between Mother Nature and the firefighting crews, especially those water bomber pilots. They're amazing people. Hopefully they're able to keep this at the level 1 stage and protect Churchill Falls, the community itself. I didn't realize what time it was, but can I put you on hold, come back and talk Northern Cod after the news?
Absolutely, no problem, Patty.
Okay, let's do exactly that. So we'll put Yvonne Jones on hold. When we come back, we'll pick up that conversation regarding Northern Cod. Now, of course, all the Liberal members of Parliament are really quite pleased, but the reaction on the ground, mixed to say the very least. Well, let's talk about that or whatever you want to talk about right after this. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's rejoin the Liberal member for Labrador, Yvonne Jones, on line number 4. Yvonne, you're back on the air.
Hi, Patty. Good to be back.
Good. And we don't have a whole lot of time, but can you help us understand why this was a lifting of the moratorium to return to a commercial cod fishery versus simply expanding the stewardship fishery, which would have allowed more quota for the inshore? Wouldn't have triggered the NAFO regulations for 5% for them? So why wasn't that the case? Because it's not being very well received by those who fish the cod.
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking to. There has been support for the model that we have announced, and there has been some criticism. But it's like everything, reopening of the cod fishery after 32 years is not going to be the panacea for the entire fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador. Over that 3 decades, we have seen many shifts in fisheries from, cod to shrimp to crab to many other unique species. And we've also seen declines in recent years in many of those stocks. So fishers are always looking to where they're going to be able to gain access to new fish stocks and how it's going to benefit them. Reopening the northern cod fishery as a commercial fishery is something the government has been looking at for the last couple of years and doing so very cautiously. As you know, since 2016, we've known that, the stock has been rebuilding. We've been very cautious about our approach to it in terms of how we would look at this. But I can honestly tell you, just from my area alone, over the last couple of years, I've had a tremendous lobby effort by the inshore sector in particular to move to larger quotas, to move to a commercial fishery operation. And obviously in Labrador, that means we have protected stock for our fishers in 2J. We're no longer in that competitive fishery, or we're no longer in a region where it's going to be open to all other fishers to come in. So, everybody will have a different approach to this, but what I can tell you is that Labrador has done better in the reopening of the northern cod than we ever did 30 years ago, because 30 years ago we did not have the same attachment or ability to be able to access those quotas. As you know, if you look back historically at all fisheries in Labrador, Labradorians were left behind, and many of our jurisdictions were open to fishers from all the other provinces, including the island of Newfoundland. So what we've been able to do in recent years, as we've launched new fisheries, we've been able to ensure full inclusiveness in Labrador, to ensure that their stock in their region that's directly adjacent to their communities is protected. So under this new approach, it allows us to, one, move to an offshore fishery, which is important for Labradorians as well. Unfortunately, we didn't get everything we wanted in this deal like everyone else. We would have liked to have seen, designated quotas for the Labrador Shrimp Company, which is our offshore company. But obviously, the minister has said that going forward, there will be a process in Newfoundland and Labrador where we can discuss the offshore fishery, who should be included, how those allocations should be done. So this is really just a door opening for the offshore. There's very small amount of that quota that's being allocated, but I think, there will be an opportunity to grow the fishery in that direction in the years to come.
Sure, but the specific question is, why not just expand the stewardship fishery, as opposed to, like, there was a 1982 agreement that said the first 115,000 tons of northern cod would be associated and allocated only to the inshore fleet, and we think that the offshore not only got the percentage they've got, but they're quite likely going to fish the 7% going to the indigenous communities and 3% for Nunatukkavut. So that's the specific question. Why not just expand the stewardship fishery?
Well, there's several reasons. One, people are investors in this fishery. I know in my area there are people who invest millions of dollars in enterprises. Stewardship fisheries are not long-term fisheries. They're year by year in terms of how they're designated. Opening a commercial fishery gives more longitude and sustainability for investors as well. Not everyone is going to like it. Maybe some of them just feel they can get more quota leaving it the way it is. But, there is an opportunity opportunity here to reopen a commercial fishery that allows us to grow that industry, but plus from a processing perspective as well as from an enterprise perspective. We're looking at the long term here, not just year to year, and the long-term picture is sustainable at this time with the allocations we've made. The other thing is the Indigenous people in Labrador didn't have allocated quotas until now. This is the first time ever for us in the cod fishery. We've been able to ensure that both Nunatsiavut, the Innu Nation, and Nunatuavut have access to those quotas in equal fashion. They will be able to use those allocations to either support onshore or offshore operations in Labrador, but also to be able to build their own community of fishers to ensure that their own people have access and are being able to prosecute that fishery as well. That did not happen under the stewardship fishery. The other thing you need to look at as well, it was, ideally a great idea to have a stewardship fishery to 115 metric tons, but what's happened in recent years is we don't have the processing capacity to be able to handle a lot of that. I know in my area in Labrador, we have 3 processing facilities by the shrimp company, plus a couple of landing facilities in those communities. They're employing hundreds of people. We need to ensure that those jobs can continue, and in order to do that, we need to have sustainable quotas and a commercial fishery. So It's not going to be satisfactory to everyone, but we can't continue to operate the northern cod stock on a year-to-year basis. We need a sustainable fishery. We need it to be more inclusive, and we need it to be able to maximize the opportunities for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So I would just say to people, look at the big picture today and this historic movement that's happening towards a commercial northern cod fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I can assure you, the minister has not had an easy job. I know I have not had an easy job with the pressure I've had on me and all my colleagues to be able to move this forward. So I really feel that she has did a good job in establishing a very fair, sustainable plan for the reopening of the commercial fishery at this stage in northern cod.
Very quickly before we go, I mean, the polls are what the polls are. Some people put a lot of credence in them at this moment in time, some maybe not. But I do think there's a conversation being had inside your caucus, given the results in Toronto St. Paul's. Carolyn Bennett won it by 24, and your candidate Leslie Church lost it by 2. There's a lot of thought out there that this is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fatigue. Where are you on his leadership? Should there be a leadership review before we call an election?
Well, first of all, I think you're going to hear a lot of discussion inside the Liberal Party. We've been having quite a bit over the last year. There's no doubt about that. We see polls every day, but election results really are what makes the difference. And the result we've just seen, I think, is an eye-opener for all of us. And there's a huge message in that Liberals need to really look at what direction we're going in. And are we really responding to Canadians in the way they expect and want us to? So I think there's going to be a lot of analysis done, some good critique and debate around this for Liberals across Canada. And, I think any time you lose an election, it's not good. I've had colleagues who've lost it, as you know, by 7 votes. And there could be any reasons that contribute to that, but I think you always look at the broader picture. When you're in government, when you're the incumbent party, and you're losing a by-election, you really need to look deeper and take stock of where you are and what your next moves are going to be going forward.
Should there be a leadership review of Justin Trudeau's position in the party?
Well, I really believe that the review is ongoing. I think the Prime Minister is under tremendous scrutiny by the caucus, the cabinet, and Liberals and Canadians on a daily basis. And what I can tell you is that people have not been shy about expressing their opinions and noting the positive and the negative around that. The Prime Minister is a very smart, intellectual individual. He has a strong vision for Canada, but at the same time, he's very intuitive to what Canadians are thinking and how they're responding. I think that he's giving a lot of consideration to what direction we move in next as a Liberal Party.
He doesn't seem to be from the outside looking in. So let me try it this way. Do you think Justin Trudeau should remain the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada? That's a yes or no question.
Well, I'm going to tell you, as of today, I think the Prime Minister has given his heart and soul to this party. He's committed to Canadians, and he has been duly elected. So it's entirely his decision if he keeps moving forward or if he decides to take a different direction. As of today, he's the Prime Minister, and I'm supporting him.
I appreciate the time. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yvonne Jones, Liberal member for Labrador. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 7. Gillian, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty. Thanks so much for taking my call.
My pleasure.
So I was a parent, or I am a parent who was in attendance for the town hall on Tuesday evening regarding the new school, Kinmount Terrace. I know Paul Dinn has already called in and kind of spoke about some of the issues, and I do want to echo some of those issues, but kind of also offer sort of a view from a parent themselves who was there.
Okay, go ahead.
So I do want to thank Minister Studley, Howell, and Abbott for all being in attendance and taking their time to meet with us. Also, Terry Hall from NL Schools was there, so we are very much appreciative of that. I want to send my thanks to all the parents that showed up because, as Mr. Dinn has alluded to, a lot of parents did come out. It was a nasty evening. It was children's bedtimes, but people still kind of made this a priority, so very thankful for that. Also in attendance, we had Paul Dinn himself, Jim Dinn, Tony Wakeham, and Tom Davis, and they all were there to kind of show their support. So, you know, the community is very thankful. After discussing, I guess, this high-level timeline for the new Kinmount Terrace School, we did enter into a Q&A period, and some of those questions were about, skepticism regarding the timeline that was proposed, and we were told it's aggressive and, funding will be taken into consideration of this aggressive timeline. But after the details of the school had kind of passed by, parents were more interested, I guess, in what we do in the interim. So we have, we've kind of touched on it already, the overcrowded schools, the lack of green space. We know these schools are going to be open for, at minimum, 2 more years. There was discussion that evening about Leary's Brook Junior High actually be remaining open. There is no plan to close this school. So with no plan to close the school, and right now, we're told Kinmount Terrace will be K-7, PWC currently 9-12. So we're missing a grade. The grade 8s are missing. So we know at some point there will be some decision of reconfiguration again. But right now, Leary's Brook Junior High, the plan is to remain open. So we do need to look at these buildings and the structure and what we can offer our students in children in the meantime to make the conditions at these schools acceptable. So a lot of the questions from parents during that evening was, well, what do we do in the meantime? And Mr. Dinn had said that us parents, we did get together and we compiled a list of concerns that we had regarding concerns came forward for Larkall Academy, for Leary's Brook Junior High, Prince of Wales Collegiate, and we put all of those concerns into a document and we had it printed. So we had it there for all parents to see and for the ministers to see. If you don't mind, I would like to kind of just briefly go through some of those concerns. So Larkall Academy, it was noted there's broken air purification units that needed to be replaced, windows that cannot be opened properly, or windows that were missing screens, traffic calming measures, and this came up with Larkall Academy and Leary's Brook. Basically, there's one small sign to indicate it's a school zone, whereas you go to other schools in Metro St. John's and you're seeing crosswalk lights, you're seeing radar speed signs, you have speed bumps, you have street narrowing, all kinds of different measures. So with children walking back and forth between these schools, traffic calming on Vinicombe and Larkall is utmost importance to parents. For Leary's Brook Junior High, we had things like broken ceiling fans in the gym getting so hot the floor gets wet, no storage for gym equipment, which ends up with broken gym equipment, overcrowding, like constructing classrooms in the basements, when we know from the strategic plan that was put out by the government, I think in 2017, and then another one from 2020 to 2023, it said that classrooms in the basement are just a temporary measure. Like, this should not be a fix for a school that will potentially remain open. Some other concerns were the gym equipment were not meeting school sport regulation standards. Parents have proposed, turning a portion of the parking lot, and the school was on board with that at one point, turning a portion of the parking lot into a play space potentially for a basketball game or a soccer game. Prince of Wales Collegiate, washroom modifications need to be done. Now that they have grade 9s coming to the school, it is mandatory to offer cafeteria services, but yet the cafeteria has to be now turned into a classroom. PwC is losing their learning commons, their past classrooms. So all kinds of things are now being lost, and it seems like this is reducing the education and that we're providing our students and our children now. So we were told at the meeting, and Minister Studley said, some of these are really easy fixes, and we're happy to hear her say that. She, I believe she said, fix ceiling fans, fix broken windows, that's really easy. And I personally think that is really easy. So why did the parents have to come up with a list of concerns, make a document, and present it for some of these issues to be addressed?
Right, and this is ongoing. The things we're talking about there, that's just preventative maintenance and/or regular maintenance, and it should not be difficult, and it should not require parents compiling a list of deficiencies to be dealt with at a town hall. Gillian, just because of the time on the clock, I do have to get going. I've got to sneak on a couple of quick ones. Do you have anything else very quickly before I do say goodbye?
Yeah, so that list, we were told by Minister Studley to submit our list of concerns to them, and they will have it looked at so that they could make those fixes that need to be fixed by September. We have submitted that document, so that went in yesterday. We have asked for a reply back by next Friday, July 5th, to indicate what the timeline is for those fixes and who will be doing it. So it's in the government's hands now to get those fixes back to us.
Keep us in the loop. I appreciate the time, Gillian. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. A couple of quick ones before an update for the teachers who did not get paid overnight. The NLTA President, Trent Langdon, joins us on 5. Trent, you're on the air.
Yeah, Patty, thanks for taking my call quickly. To say we're disgusted is an understatement. We've been working with this government for the last 2 years trying to find answers to teacher payroll. And once again, starting the summer here now, all of our members didn't get paid on time. We've been told that by midnight tonight, everything will be paid. But again, this is an uncertainty in the system that is so unnecessary. We have a staff person here pretty much full time dealing with teacher payroll problems, which is unheard of, really. So, very disgusted this morning.
So I've been told that subs are routinely being incorrectly paid, and some replacement teachers waiting weeks or months for pay.
Right. So this issue today was the entire membership, and as far as I know, other personnel, school personnel as well. So, but yes, that's been ongoing for a couple of years. We've been working with Minister Cody. We've been working with the Comptroller's Office to rectify these issues. Those are issues that should never be occurring in the first place, but in good faith, we've been working with them to try to work through them. But the problem with all of this, Patty, is there's so much uncertainty in the teaching field right now. To add in another piece that whether or not I'm going to get paid, and for those people out there who wonder why unions are necessary, this is exactly why unions are necessary. People did not get paid today, and people in private industry, one of their primary goals is to pay their staff on time. Yep. My question is, I wonder, did the ministers get paid today? And so that would be interesting for me to know. But another piece of this seemed to be a simple loading of a file that didn't occur overnight that was supposed to happen. And it didn't happen. But this day and age, there's got to be some type of note or some type of red mark that pops up on the screen and say, by the way, this didn't upload, teachers are not going to get paid. It's not as simple as saying a file didn't upload. Not good enough.
Yeah, no, fail-safes should be part of the process, no question.
Yeah.
Trent, just because of the time, I'll leave it there. I've got to sneak on one before we run out of time, but keep us updated.
Yeah, 100%. And Patty, look, we're talking about teachers here who may have defaulted on mortgage payments and car payments and so on. What needs to happen? If that happened and there's a fee associated with that, government needs to be on the hook for those default payments.
No question. Thank you, Trent.
Thanks, Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Last word goes to line number 2. Jim, you're on the air.
Yes, good afternoon. Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, sir. How about you? What's on your mind?
Patty, do you know anything about the senior citizens getting a one-time payment this month?
No, but I do know if you qualify for the Newfoundland Labrador Seniors Benefit, which is paid out quarterly, just like your GST, there's a 15% increase to the benefit this year. And so for the maximum benefit of, I think it's $1,500, maybe $1,520, that's a net family income up to just over $29,000. It moves all the way to $42,000, with, of course, a reduced benefit, but that gets paid out the same time as GST. So the next one is July.
Okay, Patty. Thank you very much for all of your information.
I appreciate your time, Jim. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Right, bye-bye. Yeah, that seniors benefit, the 15% increase, that affects about 50,000 seniors here in the province. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands who support the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.